Hi, I'm Reggie Brooks, Executive Director of the Holtz Heroes Foundation, and welcome to the Chris Zorich podcast as we celebrate Black History Month and some of the legendary players from the Lou Holtz era.
Welcome everyone to a special edition of the Zorich podcast. Teamed up with the Holtz Heroes Foundation to celebrate Black History Month. We'll be interviewing some of the amazing student athletes who became instant legends at Notre Dame. Today, we've been able to gather one of the most impressive groups of former Notre Dame players that I think has existed during the Holtz era. And I say that because these are all college football Hall of Famers. Yes, it's amazing how many college football Hall of Famers Coach Holtz had during his era at Notre Dame. So first and foremost, we have Tim Brown, Heisman Trophy winner and Pro Football Hall of Famer. We have Rocket Ismail, All-American National Championship and NFL alum. And we have Aaron Taylor, All-American, Lombardi Award winner, and Super Bowl champion. Gentlemen, welcome to the Black History Celebration presented by Holtz Heroes and the Zorich Foundation. Thank you guys very much.
Great to be here, brother.
This is kind of really exciting for me because I've had a chance to, this will sound weird, but I had a chance to play with all you guys. So this is very impressive. I'm excited that I know really some great players. But since we are talking about Black History Month, I'd just like to start off kind of, Tim, what was your experience being a Black student athlete at Notre Dame?
For me, man, when I got ready to go to ND, my dad, not that he was against it. He definitely wanted me to go get that education, but he was concerned about me going to Indiana for sure. But after he relayed his experiences of dealing with, Caucasians, I was prepared for anything. And so obviously his experience and what my experience was at Notre Dame was something totally different.
Sure.
But because I had a barrier that was so high that anything could possibly happen, I think the things that did happen, only came up to this high. You know what I mean? So they were, things that you thought about, but, simple thing like a car full of white kids can get on campus to go to dinner. Car full of Black kids can't go on campus, and it was just something we learned to deal with, right? So what would we do? We let the white guy drive our car,
You have to adapt.
And you just dealt with it, man. So, I think when I look back on it, it may have been a lot of more wild moments, but at that time, man, you just dealt with it the best you could and kept moving on. But again, there wasn't a lot of incidents that really, went to the place where, man, something should be done about this, in my opinion, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting because we've heard from regular Black students that oftentimes they hated game day weekends, right? Because when you would have white alumni come back, I mean, everybody was Ricky Waters or Tim Brown or Tony Rice, right? Or of course, Rocket Ismail, right? And so I know there were some Black guys in my dorm who literally, and I didn't quite understand it yet until they were like, Chris, man, this is really a thing. And I was kind of blown away by it, but it was a thing where they actually kind of hated those game day weekends.
Wow.
Rocket, you got a story you want to share? Kind of what was your experience being a Black student athlete at Notre Dame?
So, man, it was similar to what Tim spoke about, because I remember, and it was so interesting, just to give you context and background. Born in Newark, New Jersey, and literally the only white people I ever saw was the Brady Bunch, Partridge Family, and the I Love Lucy, and like television. Like, so, man, I was like, man, I love white people. They are the best. And then, man, literally, I was like, man, it was like subconsciously, it was like my opinion of the white people when I meet them one day is going to be amazing. And then, so the North school system says, hey, we're gonna do this big educational thing, and we're gonna take everybody and to go see the movie, this groundbreaking monumental movie, and we get to the library, and they're like, and I'm all excited. We're in the Newark Library, this amazing architectural design building, just massive stone is very important walking. And so our class is on the balcony, and the screen comes on. Man, how about the name of that movie was Roots? And it scared the hell out of me. I was like, oh, hell no. White people are what I thought they were. Okay. When I was watching that movie, I felt like, bruh, I was shook. Like, I was so scared. I would have dreams about white people like chasing me and trying to capture me and trying to get me that Kunta Kinte Toby thing.
Oh my
like
Lord.
literally. And so anyway, that shook my world. And then I was like, okay, this is a different, like, because everything around me was all black. I was like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't a bad thing, man. Let's just try to keep it like this. Then my father dies and we have to move. Well, not have to move. My 77-year-old grandmother brings us out to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And it is like the complete opposite. It's like we had like, I remember we had like 2 light-skinned people, and then the rest of them that I saw was Puerto Rican. And so it was like, that's the closest thing to white that I ever saw. And now I'm flipped, and it's like 99% white in Wilkes-Barre at the time, and then us. And so my subconscious expectations were like, ooh, man, my heart was beating a little fast. It was kind of like I was a little afraid. And I remember my first experience was kind of like anything. What broke the ice was we walked outside of the house. My little brother, he was taller than me at this time, Kadri. We go outside, we see like the little boys in the neighborhood or whatever. And they had, it was kind of like everybody siding us up. And then my brother was like, yeah, man, any of y'all fast? And they were like, and he said, my brother, and he was pointing at me like, my brother can beat any of y'all in the race. And I remember they were like, go get Chico. This cat, Lyle Brunson, his mom was black, his dad was white. So he looked like Chico from Chico and the Man, Freddie Prinze Jr. And so he was the fastest cat that they had at the time. Man, we got in the middle of the street in front of my grandmother's house, 17 Race Street. Wow. We got in the middle of the street, and they were like, light pole, ready, yak, 2 steps, gone. And I was like, oh. And it was like, after that, the word spread. So with all the neighborhood kids, it was like I had some clout. And then the adults, they knew my grandmother, Mrs. Balknight. So it was like it was like a grace was provided. And one time somebody threw a brick at our door and it hit the screen door and put a little dent in it, but that was light work. Now I set all that up. That's the context that I have. Listen.
You got the context.
Before I go to Notre Dame, my mother, like, everything is lovely, beautiful, visit. My mom, and this is where I get back to where I said in the beginning, like similar to what Tim, my mom, I don't know if it was a week before or something, she literally was like, hey, and it was like she wasn't happy, or she like, it was kind of like like a fear or some kind of like it wasn't a good feeling. Like I could feel how she was feeling. And when she was communicating to me, she's like, I want you to promise me that whenever you're not on campus, you'll wear something that identifies you as a Notre Dame student and a football player. But it was like, the way she said it, it was with fear. It wasn't with like a sense of being proud that you're a member of this university, or proud that you're a member of the team. It was like a sense of fear. And then she told me that I think the Ku Klux Klan, like, I think that was like, I don't know if that was their birthplace or if they had a strong.
Indiana's a birthplace for the Klan, yeah. Okay,
so she gave me that piece of history, and then I got a little afraid again. I was like, oh snap, what the hell? And then I remember she gave me like the police, like, if you're in a car with your friends and the police pull you over, She was like, make sure you roll down all the windows, make sure you turn on all the lights, and make sure you put your hands in a place. And he said, don't get jittery, don't get, and she's flooding me with all this. I was like, what the, like, we never had this conversation. Where did it come out? And so I think because of her experience, you know, growing up in Mississippi, in her young part of life, then her family migrated to Detroit. It was like those experiences that she had, and then it was like she was now giving me information like, you're about to go into the world, and you're a young Black man, and I'm thinking everything is beautiful. People love me. I'm a football player. I have my football with privileges. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know I'm not on a high level like white people, but I'm not like, they're gonna give me the benefit of the doubt at least. Man, that junk was, when she said that, it made me, it shook me up. I'm gonna be honest with you, it shook me up. It made me a little bit of afraid, and it made me kind of cautious. But I'm glad she gave me that advice as far as police are concerned. But after that, man, when I got on campus, like, I'm thankful. Like, I'm telling you, I had a grace that the only other incident that I could even see, and it could be that, was when we were watching a bookstore basketball game. This was after my sophomore year, and you know, T. Rice and them were putting work in. They're killing everybody. I think it was AdWorks or admin or something, and they're putting work in. And T. Rice had on some shorts from the NFL Combine, and they said NFL on them. And so, you know, the students, that's one of the times they get to really hate the athletes, and it's all good. It's just because, hey, you're the athletes against the student body or your team, and so forth and so on. And I remember the guy, and the way he said it, man, it was like you could feel like the serpent-like anger, hatred, disdain in his delivery. And he's like, hey, Tony, don't you mean CFL? And it was like, he said that in the game, you know, T. Wright, they killing whoever they're playing. And I remember sitting next to him, and I remember I felt that same feeling that when I watched Roots, when the cop came to the house, when my mother was saying, hey, man, don't mess around, wear some Notre Dame stuff wherever you go outside of the campus, and make sure you have that police etiquette. I felt that. That's the only other time I can say that was something that came to the forefront during my entire time at Notre Dame.
Well, one of the interesting things, and Aaron, I'm going to get to you in a second. One of the things you talked about, Rocket, was when you were little and you were kind of watching TV, right? And so your first experience with white people was like, it's interesting because, well, here it is, because oftentimes if you're not in an integrated area, and Chicago is really segregated. I mean, you talk about the black population of America being 13%. I mean, there are a lot of white folks who haven't had a chance to meet or be around black people. And so oftentimes, Rocky, when you shared, it was like your first experience with white people was they were entertainers, they were actors, right? And oftentimes it's reversed, right? Because oftentimes a white person's first experience with black people, what? Sports, entertainment. Right. So I thought it was kind of interesting that your experience was literally the exact opposite of what a lot of white folks experience as well. Aaron, I don't know if we have enough time, but
I'll take these 25 seconds. What my experience was, contrary to Rocket, who learned about white people from the Brady Bunch of Roots, I was kind of a little bit more in the middle because the first person I ever met was my mama. So we lived in Oakland till I was probably 9 years old, and then had to move from there because the Pimps and Hoes moved in across the street, and that was like the last time we lived in the city, in the hood. We went out to the burbs. So I was kind of in a neighborhood and in an environment from like since I was 10 years old where I had to find a way to assimilate and fit in. It was very clear I didn't look like the other people. I wasn't like the other people. But what was interesting for me in my experience, and this kind of carried over to Notre Dame, was for some of my friends, I was too black. For some of my friends, I was too white. For some of my friends, I wasn't black enough. For some of my friends, I wasn't white enough. And I never really felt like I had my people or fit in. And I think that's one of the great things about sports is, and Rocket found that out in the middle of the street running light pole to light pole, that sports is a great equalizer. So I was on the playground killing fools in kickball, dominating in tetherball. I don't know if I've ever been beat at tetherball. I was crushing fools. But that carried on. I went to De La Salle High School, which was an all-Catholic high school. And there was something about the standard in doing things differently that I think being part of a Catholic school brought to the table for me in high school that I think appealed to me at Notre Dame. And I remember when I got there, it felt a lot like when I got to De La Salle, my junior, senior year in high school. And there was no question you stood out. And you stood out like a sore thumb. Everybody knew who you were, and I think we compounded that wearing all of our issue gear and our indoor turf shoes everywhere to class and everything that we did so that they knew. But it was clear that like there was such a small Black population at Notre Dame when we were there that we all kind of hung together. And then, you know, we had friends of all different races, particularly on the offensive line. And I think position by position, some are more integrated, if you will, than others just because of the bodies that make them up. But like there was that understanding of that shared experience. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about here is having a shared experience that if your skin color is different than other folks, you might have some history and some stories in your past that other people might not be able to relate to, which is the same thing for us when we're talking about, you know, our friends from the dominant culture, if you will.
Well, and I think it's interesting because as I talked to other guys, they talked about how, I mean, this was their first experience, like dealing with white people, right? And because Notre Dame doesn't have athletic dorms, oftentimes your first year, you were rooming with a regular student, and 99.9% of the time, that student was white. And it was really interesting because I was talking to Ronaldo Wynn, and he was talking about how him and his roommate didn't talk like the first 2 weeks.
What?
Because they were just on different. It was just a different experience. So I mean, although everybody's experience is different, I think what we were kind of lucky in a sense where we had a chance to kind of experience that academic normal life, so to speak, right? As opposed to at other schools where you're instantly and for the rest of your 4 or 5 years, you're stuck with the athletes and you may only see regular students in class.
That's right.
I think the integration of how we lived early on in the dorms is one of the things I think Notre Dame really got right. It forced us to be normal cats. And it was the one time, the 1 year where we had to be a normal student for whatever that looked like, in addition to all the responsibilities, obviously, that we had before 8 a.m. and after school got out. But I really look back on that opportunity that I met a bunch of people there's no chance I would have had a chance or an opportunity to meet because I would have hung out with guys that understood me and on the football team. But my freshman year started friendships that carry on to this day that otherwise I probably wouldn't have had a chance to meet.
Tim, you mentioned kind of, you know, your father experienced some things. I mean, what was it like when maybe after your first year, you came back from Notre Dame to back where you grew up, back in your neighborhood? I mean, were you looked upon differently or kind of what experience was that like?
Yeah, you know, I mean, leaving Texas to go play football is not a good thing, right? You know, during those days, you just didn't do it. You had so many good football teams in Texas. Why in the world would you want to go someplace else? So, I mean, yeah, I got called everything, man. You know, uppity. You think you're smarter than everybody. And these are from my guys at my high school. This is not from, you know, other people. You know, and I would come home and try to go out to events or parties or whatever. You know, I always got ran out because my boys were like, look, man, we're not going to be fighting for you every night. We try to go out with you. So, because everybody was, I don't know if people were jealous, but it was tough. It was really tough. You know, thankfully for me, you know, I had a great family, got a big family, and that sufficed for me. You know what I mean? I didn't have to have friends to hang out with or whatever. I was only home for a couple of weeks anyway, most of the time. So for me, just to be able to hang out with family and move on was good enough because I realized that, man, I didn't talk to my high school boys from maybe when I was 20 till I was 45, maybe.
Wow.
I went 20, 25 years,
Whoa.
Without speaking to them because, I mean, I didn't know how to reconnect with them because the problem was that we were on different levels, right? Well, if I'm in the NFL and I keep going up and up, how am I going to go back and, reach out? And thankfully, a couple of years ago, one of my boys who was a security guard at an office building that I was doing some work at, and I was walking in the building, and he said Timmy, like only he could say Timmy. I hadn't heard his voice in 30 years. I almost dropped my briefcase, man, because who it was, So we've sort of reconnected, and I took him to the Raiders game when the Raiders came to play the Cowboys. So yeah, but yeah, man, look, it was a big thing. It really was a big thing that people looked at you differently and thought you, and still do to this day.
Sure.
Oh, you the kid that left, you left Notre Dame, or you left
Wow.
Texas to go to ND, so people still are not happy about that.
You are listening to a special edition of the Zorich podcast. We've been able to team up with the Holtz Heroes Foundation to celebrate Black History Month, and we are talking with an amazing collection of individuals who played during the Holtz's era, and these are College Football Hall of Famers Tim Brown, Rocket Ismail, and Aaron Taylor. Rocket, I want to talk to you again, kind of the same question about with Tim. When you came back after that first year, I mean, what was that experience like for you?
So the first time I got a chance to go,
the condensed version.
All right, all right. Let me do it quick. I was thinking that in my mind. I was like, how am I going to make this short? All right. So check it out. At the right before, how before you have the break and you practice. The students are gone, but we're getting ready for the bowl game, and we're getting ready for the Fiesta Bowl, and then they let you go home for a couple of days, right. And then you go. So it was like that was the first time I got a chance to go home since the season started, right before the bowl game, and man, it was so much love. So like I was the man, like it was so amazing seeing everybody. It was like I could feel the whole town was proud. So we go to this party at this prominent family's houses, and I was maybe 2 years under their younger brother, but I played with them, and it was like maybe 3 years over us and maybe 3 years under us. Everybody's at this house, man, and it's a pretty established family. Everybody's like, yo, it's a great time. And so we're there, and like I told you, like it's 98% white, and then me and my brother. So it was like all of a sudden somebody comes in the door, and everybody's like, hey, and it's the oldest brother of this family. And he must have been, if I was a freshman in college, he might have been maybe in law school or getting a master's or something. And he had that firewater in him, so he was a little tipsy. And I remember everybody's like, yo, so-and-so is here. And man, so I remember he like scanned, and so I'm like, yo, proud moment, it's about to be on. And he was like, who's the effing such? And then everybody was like, oh, wait a minute. They looked around, and they kind of like, hey. And then it was so cool because one of the guys that was, and it was crazy because it was so out of the blue. It was like I was embarrassed, and it was like it hurt my feelings. I didn't even know I had feelings that could be hurt like that. Like it was like didn't even like I thought I was, but I think it was so unexpected, and it was like a gut punch. And then I remember though, Daryl Boych, Gene Maffei, Tom Scaff were a year. They were like 2 years older than me, but they were guys we played on a team with together, and they were like big, linebackers, tight ends, the quarterback. It was like they stood up like, hey man, And nah, brother, we know it's your house, but we not having that in here. And they moved him outside of his own. Wow. So it was great, but it was that was my dominant experience right there. And so I'm gonna keep it short and end it with thank you very much.
No. That was, I mean, that was it's an interesting story because you talk about what 30, 35 years later, we could tell you're getting a little emotional, right? Because
I'm telling you, it's like they're talking about know yourself. Sometimes I hate talking about because one of the things I know about myself is there sometimes are issues or just things that you might have faced that were difficult or traumatic. You don't even realize it, right. But then you talk about it as a grown man. I'd never expect to have that type of emotion, and then it comes up because I understand human-wise, one of the safety mechanisms, we have the capacity to compartmentalize and push to the side. But what happens is long-term, that's not healthy for your body. And so your body is always looking for the opportunity to release it. So Lord willing, if I ever have to talk about that again, it won't hit me that way. But that was real, man. And it was a bad experience and a great experience, like combined.
Sure. And what also, I mean, you rattled off the names instantly of the guys that kind of came to help out, right? And yes. So as a 18-year-old freshman, you go through all of a sudden this traumatic experience, and then all of a sudden, man, you know what? These guys got my back. So that's
yes, amazing. I love it. Yes.
Amazing. Aaron, can you maybe share an experience from kind of when you spent that time in Notre Dame, and all of a sudden, you came back and things may have been a little different? May have.
Yeah, and I think first I want to acknowledge what Rocket said, and I think all of us that have a tan that is permanent have had experiences where we either try to get put in our place or are reminded that we are different, and that's the painful part. And you can see all these years later, despite his accomplishments, despite how gregarious and fun-loving, like any person on the planet don't like and appreciate and love who Rocket Ismail is, but those words are hurtful. And we've all had those experiences. And I was lucky enough where I didn't have that particularly while I was in Notre Dame, but we did have an experience where several of us were walking back from practice. And I think there was a girls' soccer game going on. And we were walking back between the fields, and there was an older white couple that was in their car. And we were just, talking. We didn't pay any attention to them. And all of a sudden it's like, cha-ching, cha-ching. And they had locked the doors in their car as we walked by. And we were like, did they just lock the door? Like, wow, mother?
Oh my God.
Being 18, 19, 21-year-old kids, we started rocking the car back.
No, oh my God. Really, thanks. Really. Really?
Hey, Aaron,
do that. It wasn't the most mature thing to do.
That just happened to me last night in the hotel.
No,
I'm coming down the hotel, and there's a white woman who is coming, and she's coming off the elevator, and she's like hurrying to get her key, and you can hear the door click. You hear the lock go on the door. It's like, oh my God. So look, it never is, man. It really never is. So, sorry about that, Aaron.
No, that's a good underscore, Tim. I think that's the point here, is that it doesn't end. And this is a long road and a long fight that we're all in for. And I think what we saw over last summer, that we still have a lot of room to go. And that's why conversations like these are so important, because I think that's the prejudice, right? The prejudging based on the color of a skin that you're supposed to act or do something or be afraid because somebody's of a particular race or culture, right. And instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt. And I always felt like at Notre Dame that we stood out. There was no question that we were athletes. There was no question that we were Black, and we weren't like everybody else or the main part of the student body. But I didn't have a lot of negative racial experiences there. Now, I went to Ohio with some friends and teammates over spring break. I went down to Texas with some teammates over spring break. And all of a sudden, like, I was a kid from California. And ironically, my mom grew up in Brownsburg, Indiana, which is just south of Indianapolis. And she married my father, who was an African-American, and in no uncertain terms, the president of the nursing school at IU, Indiana University, told my mom that if she didn't start dating that N-word, she was going to kick her out of school.
Wow.
So they had to the relationship, and they moved as far west as they could to the Bay Area during the 60s, and free love and Haight-Ashbury and all that stuff during the 60s, because that's where they felt that they could be most safe. So I grew up on the West Coast and was largely insulated from some of the racial tensions we felt in other places. In Ohio, I got it. In Texas, I got it. I definitely got it in Atlanta. I had never experienced racism like that. So this is like, I think the value I can bring is my experience was growing up in a white culture for the most part. My black friends were primarily the athletes. The knuckleheads I ran with when I got kicked out of school and was DNFs before I started playing ball is another story. But it wasn't until I got to Notre Dame and maybe out of there and went to live with Bryant Young on the south side of Chicago that I started to feel the judgment fully of what I think my darker skinned brothers and sisters grew up with all the time, like what Rocket described, what Tim described, what you described, Chris, in some of your neighborhoods was growing up in Chicago. And I think at the end of the day, man, it's we just want to be a part of, and I've always felt a part from, right? And I think those painful incidents that Rocket mentioned that all of us have been through, like we still all carry that stuff. And I think we've got a long way to go and a lot of conversations to be had. But I think when we make the goal greater understanding of who we are, what our experiences are, what our backgrounds are, what our contexts are, we can start to begin to understand where we come from. And from that place of empathy, I think that's where we can forge a new pathway forward.
Can I say something, Chris?
Please, absolutely.
Real man, you just reminded me, Aaron. I remember when I was younger, it was like the dominant, the best way to describe some confrontational interaction with white people was always prejudice. And it was like, I was like, okay, they're just prejudging. And the word to me would imply that once we got to know each other and conversated, if you will, if the opportunity came along, fellowship, or if it came through sports, I was like, oh, okay, whatever my prejudice, whatever fed my prejudice disposition is diminished now. And that racism when I was younger, that was like that cat that was beating Kunta Kinte and the slave masters, like that. It was on that level, like racism, these cats could kill you, or they could. And so, and I used to wonder, I was like, man, how come it totally went over prejudice now, and it's just everything is racism. And it's like, to me, I think it does an injustice, because it's like degrees of how people behave and respond in certain instances. And I think when you go to the most extreme degree to explain every behavior and every interaction, it does an injustice, and it actually causes you to go from a sober mind, which is in a nutshell self-control, to it triggers you to get in an extreme emotional disposition. And when you're in extreme emotional dispositions, nobody's communicating. You're debating, or you're yelling, and or it's confrontational. So that's something to meditate on.
One of the things we did learn during our time, and Tim, you only had a couple years with Coach Holtz, and his mantra was trust, love, and commitment. I had it for 4 years. The rest of us had it for that period of time. I mean, what does that mean for you now, or what did it mean at that time, Tim? Trust, love, commitment.
Look, I mean, when Holtz came in, man, he came into a beaten football team, right? Came into a team that had just, our last game, we had just got demolished by the University of Miami. And, it could have gone either way, and I think for most of the guys, we had a lot of guys who were potentially going to the NFL. We had the biggest offensive line in football at that time. And there was just a lot happening, man. And so I think for him to be able to get control of that team was a masterful deal, because and And he put it out there. The first day we met with him, he said, look, we're going to win a championship in 3 years. The first day we met with him, he said that. But he said it was only going to happen if the juniors and seniors, if we bought in. And I can tell you, there was a lot of mumbling about that. There was a lot of mumbling about that. Hey, I want to win a championship too. I want a ring on my finger. You know, you're talking about winning at 3. Why can't we do it at 2? You know what I mean? And that was sort of the attitude, man, for a minute. And finally, we all just sort of got together and said, man, look, let's do what the guy's asking us to do, right? And you know, hey man, 3 years later, there was a championship at Notre Dame. So we feel as if because we bought in, you know what I mean? We were the stepping stones, we were the building blocks for that deal. We ain't getting no ring, but still, you know, we can take pride in that. And so, you know, so I mean, that trust thing is big, man. You know, in any relationship you're in, if you don't have trust, you don't have a relationship. That's just the way it is. And so it doesn't matter what relationship you're talking about, there has to be some form of trust. So and I think that was a big thing that Holtz got us to do with him, because you know we had trusted the guy before and he led us into a massacre. You know what I mean? So how are we now going to trust another guy who we don't know? You know what I mean? Who didn't recruit us? Who our parents have no clue who he is? You know what I mean? So, but I think you know the juniors and seniors who were going to be juniors and seniors, by us buying in, it was a big deal, man. And certainly for me, it was a huge deal, because when he started talking that, you know, you could be the best player in the country deal, I told that brother, you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong guy. I love football, but I'm gonna get this education and going back home, man, and I'm gonna do my thing and I'm gonna be good. And you know, it literally took him 2 weeks every day of showing me what I was doing on the field and telling me that I was doing things that he didn't ask me to do and all that kind of stuff. And then he made the statement that I was the most intelligent player that he had ever coached. And all the media came to Notre Dame, right? And I told everybody, I said, hey, well, don't get too excited. He was at Arkansas and Mississippi. so it don't mean that much. But you know, that statement meant a lot to me, because I just finally said to myself, Tim, listen to the guy, prove him wrong, but do everything he says. And at the end of the day, you know, he'll be wrong about what he's saying, and we'll move on. And that was basically my attitude, man, that I was going to do everything he asked me to do, you know, to 100% of my ability. And that's what I did. And a couple of years later, I was the best player in the country, man. But it's all because I trusted everything he said and tried my best to do everything that he asked me to do.
Rocket, what does trust, love, and commitment mean to you?
Well, initially, it was just words. It felt like it was and when I say that, just words, when I was that young, I didn't understand the impact of trust, the impact of love, the impact of commitment fully. Looking back on it, it was embodied when I remember going, might have been I don't know if it was my sophomore, it might have been my sophomore year, or maybe the spring ball or the springtime before my junior year, something like that. And I got a call. We were in my dorm room. I got a call on the phone, and it was my little brother on campus, and he was crying hysterically. And all I could hear was, my dad died, my daddy died, something like that. And it was like, we're in my room at Grace Hall, like maybe 45 hours before it's time to go to practice. So I'm like, I just jump up and I sprint across campus, and I totally forget that we have practice, and we didn't have cell phones, you know, all that stuff. So I'm a no-show at practice. So I literally I stayed with my little brother until we got him home. Got him at the airport. We took him to the airport. Man, by this time I'm at the airport. I was like, oh snap, I'm supposed to be at practice. Man, that's probably like 5 hours later or something crazy. And I remember I run back across again, and I come into Loftus, and it was like Coach Holtz, you know, remember he had that golf cart. Right, and it was like he was so it looked like he was worried. I'm sure he was. You know, you don't realize as a coach you have other people's children, and man, you don't know where they are, what they're supposed to. Like that's not something. As I think about it now, that's probably not a good feeling. Nobody can find me, whatever.
Right.
And man, I remember getting in the golf cart, and I told him what happened, and it was just like he was just like, Rocket, you're a special young man. Said some other, like, man, he was just really like blessing me with his words. And it was like in that moment, I felt trust, love, and commitment. And it was like from that moment on, I understood how impactful that those declarations are. And I was thankful for being in an environment that made a commitment to being trustworthy, being loving, and committing to do that for everybody who was in that family.
Sure. Aaron, what about you?
Yeah,
what does it mean to you?
Lou Holtz and trust, love, and commitment. A little TLC, right? I think we all got brainwashed with that right away, but I don't think I knew this at the time, but what I've grown to appreciate now is that trust says that in the inevitable times of adversity that you can count on me, that I will be there, that I will find a way to do my job no matter what. And as Tim alluded to earlier, like that's the foundation of any team. And a marriage is a two-person team. A football team is 105 guys or 85 on scholarship. You talk about the workforce and what those teams are, familial teams. Like you have to have that bedrock of trust. And from that, if you have that and that's solid, then you can start to pile on the other things. But if you don't, no matter how much talent you have, and it sounded like that's kind of where Notre Dame was before Holtz got there, what TB was saying, then it don't matter how much talent you have because it ain't going to be enough. So that foundation of trust was critical. And I think very early on, that was reinforced. The love piece was reinforced. The commitment piece was reinforced, especially if you missed the voluntary workouts. You showed up for voluntary self-adjustment at 5 a.m. and locked us in the snow. I love the voluntary nature of the voluntary workouts. But I think at its core, like we talk about athletes and having situational awareness, like Holtz was extremely gifted at being situationally aware, just like we heard with Rocket, just like we heard with Tim, like, and we've all got those stories where he said the right thing at the right time in the right way that either galvanized us all and, you know, save Jimmy Johnson's ass for me. Like that classic line that in an instant wraps everything up and gets the team lights a fire, and it was over. That was the moment that they were going to win that game, win the national championship. And I just think that when you look at teams, and I'm a husband and a father and an employee at CBS, like all of my teams, if we don't have that TLC, at the very least the T, if we don't have that trust, then it don't matter what we do and we're wasting our time. We will not reach the level of greatness that we're capable of doing. And I think to Holtz's credit, he and the university did a really good job of reinforcing that and putting their money where their mouth was.
Gentlemen, this has been great. I wish we could go on forever. I know Rocket.
I'm sorry.
Rocket can go on.
Forgive me. I didn't mean to talk
no,
so
not at all. These are great stories. You know, and it's interesting because we all came from different backgrounds, but we all kind of share not only the same experiences, so to speak, but also this love for this place that we might not have expected to be talking about trust, love, and commitment. I mean, I'm 52. I didn't expect to be talking about something I heard it when I was 18, you know? So the lessons we've learned from this little short guy with a lisp are really kind of transcending a lot of the things that really kind of help us in life. So, I mean, the idea that we're able to kind of celebrate this during Black History Month from some great, amazing athletes with literally better people. I want to thank Tim Brown. I want to thank Aaron Taylor. I want to thank Rocket Ismail. Also want to thank Reggie Brooks and Luke Holtz for having the chance and really the wherewithal to kind of bring these stories to head during Black History Month. So, gentlemen, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you guys again.
Love you, brothers, man. I absolutely mean that.
All right.
Yes,
Love you guys.
Same here.
All right.
Appreciate you guys, man. Good talking to you guys.
All right.
There you
You
go.
too,
That was
Joe.
good. Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate it.